everyone, welcome back to The Learning Gardener. If you haven't been here before, my name is Pip. Welcome to the garden. This is Dobby. He's going to be probably part of this video because he won't leave me alone. Dobby and I are trying to prepare the garden for a heat wave, so I thought we would take you through and show you what we actually do to try and minimize the damage. We've already had 2 very hot days. It's actually autumn here in Australia, but we are about to get a couple of real scorcher days. So we're preparing everything that we possibly can to try and minimize the damage. The first thing I do is actually walk the dogs. Now, Dobby is not my dog. We're looking after him for a couple of weeks, but I walk the dogs first because hot days are boring for dogs, and going out on doggy walks, I can see a caterpillar on my brassica, during the heat is not pleasant for anybody. So that's the very first thing we do, but we try and get out in the garden really early to actually water everything. Ideally, usually I keep an eye on the weather forecast, for a couple of reasons. If I'm sowing seeds, I prefer to sow seeds when we've got rain on the forecast, so that the rain does the job of helping the seeds germinate. And also I try not to plant seeds if we've got a heat wave coming, because otherwise your seedlings will often germinate and die. We do have some baby beets and radishes in here that have self-seeded. We're just going to have to see how they survive. Same for this bed. This bed is planted up with seedlings I started from seed about 5 or 6 weeks ago. This one's only a week old. These kind of beds are my priority beds because you're not always going to have time first thing in the morning, potentially before you rush off to work, to deep water all of your garden. So I do pick my priority beds, and I make sure that everything that is young or that is a seedling gets hit with some water first thing in the morning. Ideally, the heat wave happens when you're at home, and you'll also come out at lunchtime and check that your seedlings aren't getting scorched, and you might top them up with water, but always check first that you've run your hose for a little bit, so that because the water that comes out of the hose first on a hot day is often pretty hot and will actually kill your seedlings. The other reason why I check the forecast pretty regularly is because if I know that I've got a heat wave coming, then what I like to do is start prepping the garden ahead of time, because it takes quite a long time to get around and do a deep water on all of the beds and all of the gardens. So for instance, last night, yes, it was hot yesterday, but I knew that the next 3 days are going to be even worse. So what I went around and did was I used our worm wee from our worm farm to fertilize and deep water things like the pumpkins, the tromboncinos, and the things that are still producing fruit. Like we've still got some tomatoes. So they've all had a deep water and a fertilize yesterday, and I've been going around for the last couple of days and filling up our Oya pots, knowing that this heat wave was coming. The Oya pots are our main source of irrigation beside the hose, and the beautiful thing about them is that not only do the plants get consistent water because they wrap their roots around the terracotta pot and they just absorb the water out of the pot as they need it, but it encourages the plants to send roots deep because the pot is buried deep. And what that means is that the roots are generally lower in the soil, which means they're less likely to cook. It's always your more superficial rooted plants that are likely to cook a little bit more. And filling the Oyas this morning, what that's going to do is keep those plants from getting stressed. And to be honest, we've had very little damage to our leaves and to our plants despite the hideous season that we've had heat and humidity wise. When it's hot, watering your pots is a must. Containers dry out way faster than plants planted in the ground. If you've only got a limited period of time to water, these are the things that I would prioritize. My containers, my new seedlings, any seedlings that are still in their seedling trays, I actually put them with a pot planter underneath and fill them with water so that throughout the day the soil or the roots can actually suck up water so that my seedlings don't die. I also prioritize my tomatoes and my cucumbers because they're very water-based, and my roses. My roses are very thirsty because they actually need to be potted up a size. So the roots have taken up pretty much all the space in that pot, and there's not really a lot of water holding ability left in that soil because it desperately needs to go up a pot size. So I always make sure I give my roses a good drown on a day like today where it's going to be nearing 40 degrees. One of the plants that has shown some heat stress is this dahlia. So I am not going to prune off any of these brown ugly leaves until after the heat wave has passed. The reason for that is that they often then, even in their crispy state, provide a bit of a shield for younger, more tender leaves underneath them. So I'm just leaving these ugly leaves there for now, and what I am using them for is to tell me that I need to check this area more intensely. So this morning what I did was come along and stick my finger in the soil. It was dry as a bone, despite there being 5 oyas in this bed. Obviously a tuber plant like a dahlia is not going to benefit from an oya like, say, a tomato that can send roots out and wrap them around the oya, but it still surprised me that the soil was that dry. It's not as if I haven't been watering this bed. So we've given this dahlia a good dose of water this morning. I want to be a little bit careful with dahlias because the tubers can rot. So I will keep an eye on this, but we'll definitely be watching this plant and watering it probably every day for the next 3 days while it's super hot. In this container we actually have a great example of a plant that has been sunburnt due to heat stress. This is a heuchera, and darker heucheras tend to cope with more hours of direct sunlight than lighter colours, in my experience anyway. This one has definitely got scorched, but underneath that there are perfectly healthy young leaves, so I'm just going to leave those scorched leaves on top to work like an umbrella and protect those younger leaves, and then in a couple of days, if we've got a favourable forecast, I will snip the ugly burnt leaves off. It is only 10 AM and most of the vegetable patch is still in shade, but already the camera has overheated, so that tells you a little bit about how hot today is going to be. I've already done my watering. I've filled all the oyas, which means I'm not going to look out and see wilted pumpkin vines later on. But if you have a little bit of extra time, one of the great things to do either after one hot day or after a couple of hot days is to come around and have a look for disease. You are going to get areas in your garden that are hard to manage, like this area. So this area in summer, before the sun has moved like it already has now, gets sun for a couple of hours a day. It also gets really intense reflective heat off the colour bond, and I've had this issue in a garden when I lived in Sydney, where I had a rockery and the heat that came off those rocks was unreal, to the point where I actually had to put up shade cloth to protect the plants to get them through those really intense heat days. But the roses are going to be fine with that today. However, our sun has now moved position, so they're not getting as much sun as they would like. So they're going to be a little bit more prone to being unhappy. I'm okay with a little bit of black spot on some of the leaves of my roses. We live in a coastal area. It just kind of comes with the territory, and honestly I don't really worry about doing anything about it. What I'm not okay with is powdery mildew, which I found yesterday on this one. And I think it's on this one because this one gets even less sun than this does because of the positioning. And also because yesterday when I got up first thing in the morning, we had that first kind of cool season dew. So I think everything's just getting a little bit more damp overnight, and that's leading to the development of fungal diseases when combined with the intense heat and humidity that we're getting. And the humidity has just been unrelenting. So I don't actually drink milk because I'm sensitive to casein, which is a protein in dairy, but I'm going to go out and buy some milk, and I'm going to mix it 1 part milk, 5 parts water, so 100 mils milk, 500 mils water, and I'm going to spray these roses to try and kill this powdery mildew, because I don't want this fungus taking off and going over all my roses. I don't want it killing the plant. I want it to cover the color bond. I want it to create a beautiful privacy screen. Do I care about powdery mildew on my cucumbers or my tromboncino or my zucchini? No, don't do anything about it. Don't bother. But on my roses, I do care.
This shows you what the mildew on the rose looks like, and it was quite widespread over this entire rose. So I went and picked up some milk, and I mixed up 50 mils of milk with 250 mils of water, and I covered the entire rose in the spray whether it had mildew on it or not, but most of it actually did. Dobby was pretty keen on the process.
Dobby, are you drinking milk off the roses, are you? You're a silly boy.
The next morning I came out and had a look, and I was shocked by how effective it had been. There were still little pools of milk on some of the leaves, and there was only 1 or 2 leaves that I could see that actually still had any powdery mildew on it at all. It had been such an effective treatment for these roses.
I use hot days to tell me where I need to lift my game or where I need to do something because trouble is brewing. I use burnt leaves to tell me where I'm not watering adequately. And I use hot days to go looking for disease. As I said, we hunt for powdery mildew on roses, or we accidentally stumble across it, like what happened yesterday. But there are some diseases that you will notice that need to be treated in hotter weather, like leaf miner on this lemon tree. Am I going to do anything about it in this heat wave? No, because it requires neem oil. And if I spray neem oil or any oil-based pesticide or whatever on my plants when it's about to be 40 degrees for a couple of days, I'm going to come back to a new crisp and glover. It is going to be so crispy, it's unreal. I made that mistake once before. It's a mistake I will make only once. So don't spray any oil-based stuff on your plants when it's about to be hot. Use the heat to have a look for areas of disease, areas where you need to lift your watering game or where you need to adjust your irrigation. And just because it's hot doesn't mean you have to do something about it right away. The main thing when it's going to be hot is to protect from radiant heat if you need to with shade cloth or umbrellas or whatever you got, and to make sure the plants that need a good drink of water get that good drink of water, ideally first thing in the morning. But if you're like me and you don't always have time to do everything first thing in the morning, try and do some the day before and some the morning of, and prioritize the morning of to be your little seedlings, the things you've just recently planted that are more likely to get heat stressed because they're not established in the ground or in the garden bed, or your water-loving plants like your hydrangeas, your cucumbers, your tomatoes. Mostly your tomatoes will be fine, but they will appreciate a little bit of a drink. There are 2 other things that I ideally like to do in hot weather, and one of them is down here, and that is make sure my worms don't cook. So this is my worm farm, and it is looking dry as a bone. So we're going to give these guys, oh, slug. We are going to remove the slug. Gross. Goodbye. But the underneath layer is quite moist. That's where the poop is from the last layer, but this layer is just dry, and the worms are not going to be happy up here in dry food and dry grass clippings, irrespective of the weather. But in super hot days, they really need that moisture to keep them cool. So I'm just going to dampen things off a little bit, And I'm going to put in a decent amount of water just to make sure that that doesn't dry out. Ideally, I would actually go inside and get some newspaper and dampen that, or some cardboard, and dunk it in water and put it on top to keep things nice and moist, which I will do later. But I got to take a certain someone to the vet because his behavior has been offensive, and he's very, very itchy, so I think he needs some attention, and we've got to be there in about half an hour. So we don't have time to deal with that now, but we can give them a little bit of water before the heat kicks up, and we can come out and give them a little bit more protection later on in the day. Because I actually remembered to drain the worm wee last night, that means that I can actually top them up with a little bit more water without worrying about flooding them. I'm not a great worm mum. I do tend to forget to empty the worm wee, and they have flooded plenty of times. You do the best you can. You can't win at everything. The last thing I like to use the hot weather for is weed maintenance. I use a mixture of vinegar and dishwashing liquid to kill my weeds, because then I'm not bringing glyphosate into the garden, I'm not poisoning things, I'm not hurting bees, I'm not doing anything bad for the garden, it's just vinegar. And you can see back here, I sprayed this the other day. It takes about 2 days for it to go really crispy, but if you spray it in this intense heat, they die so much faster. Now, we don't have time to mix it up and do it right now. I'll do it when I get back from taking Dobby to the vet, but you can see we got some weed maintenance to do in this area. And yeah, I could whip a snipper through here, but last time I did, it flicked a stone up and broke a window. So I tend to use vinegar in this area, and you can see it's quite effective.
After the vet, we came back and mixed up the vinegar mixture. So I have a 2-litre spray bottle, so I pour as much vinegar as I can get in there without the detergent bubbles spraying everywhere. And I do roughly 2 tablespoons of dishwashing liquid to a litre of vinegar. I find that is the most effective. There's a lot of online recipes that say you need to add salt and just use 1 tablespoon of liquid soap, but I just find that the salt clogs up the spray gun no matter how hard you try to get it to mix in properly, and 2 tablespoons of dishwashing liquid is more than adequate. The dishwashing liquid acts as like a sticky surfactant, which basically allows the acidic vinegar to then smother and kill the plant, which when you combine it with the heat of the sun makes everything go crispy pretty quickly. This is about 36 hours later, and you can see where I've got good coverage and where I missed a little bit, and that's the nice thing with the vinegar, you can see pretty quickly, but you can see that it is very, very effective, and we just need to get out there and tidy up a little bit more.
So I hope you guys have found this video about how I try and help my garden get through these hideously hot and humid days helpful, and maybe you found a few tips that might work for you. The thing is, when it's really, really hot, it is hard to get the garden to limp through, and you've just got to do the best you can. But hopefully there's something in this video that you found useful. If there is, don't forget to let me know in the comments below what it was. Dobby and I really appreciate you guys hanging out with us and spending time with us in the garden. I hope you consider subscribing to this channel or liking this video, because it really helps the channel grow, and it helps me know what kind of videos you guys want to see on this channel. But for right now, this little guy's got to go to the vet, and I've got to get inside because it is already very, very hot, even though we've still got a decent amount of shade. But we're going to melt today, aren't we, Dobbs? It's already hot. It's going to be a rough couple of days. Hopefully we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.